You feel the cold seep through the stone floors of the Hofburg Palace, a chill that has nothing to do with the Viennese winter. It is January 1815, and the city waltzes on, a frantic, glittering dance on the edge of a precipice. You, a junior scribe in the French delegation, have just finished copying the document. The ink is still damp, the vellum smelling of iron and secrecy. It is a treaty of defensive alliance, signed not between old friends, but between yesterday's bitterest enemies, Britain, Austria, and the newly restored Kingdom of France. A pact directed at one man. You watch your master, Charles Maurice de Talleyrand-Périgord, as he stands by the window, his club foot resting slightly forward. He does not look at the snow-dusted gardens. He is looking inward, calculating the angles of a shattered chessboard. He has performed a miracle. He has taken France, the pariah of Europe, defeated and occupied, and placed it at the heart of a new coalition, making it the indispensable weight in the balance of power. The price of this miracle, you suspect, is another river of blood. The treaty you hold is a loaded pistol. And tonight, Prince Metternich and Lord Castlereagh intend to point it directly at the chest of the Tsar of all the Russias. The confrontation happens not in a grand hall, but in one of Metternich's private studies, a room choked with mahogany, leather, and the scent of sealing wax. Tsar Huang Alexander I is there, his tall, imposing frame radiating an almost unbearable aura of pious certainty. He is the Agamemnon of this new age, the man who marched his armies from Moscow to Paris, and he believes God has personally tasked him with the reconstruction of Europe. His vision begins and ends with Poland, not the partitioned shell it was, but a new kingdom of Poland, vast and whole, with himself as its constitutional king. A Russian dagger aimed at the heart of Europe. My claim is not one of ambition, but of moral necessity, Alexander declares, his voice soft but resonant. The Polish people have suffered. I shall be their protector, their sovereign. Prussia will be compensated with Saxony. It is just. It is final. Metternich, ever the polished courtier, simply shakes his head, a gesture of regretful firmness. Your Imperial Majesty, such a settlement would not create a balance. It would create a threat. Austria cannot abide a Russian army on the borders of Bohemia. Castlereagh, the stoic Englishman, speaks next, his French precise and cold as the winter air. His Majesty's government desires a lasting peace, Your Majesty, a peace founded on equilibrium, not on the overwhelming preponderance of a single power. The Tsar's famously charming smile vanishes. His eyes, a pale, piercing blue, narrow. This is the resistance he has faced for weeks. He believes it is the final bluff of weaker men. He turns to the one man he expects to be silent, the representative of the vanquished. And what does France say? He asks, a hint of a sneer in his tone. Does the restored King Louis wish to lecture the man who placed him back on his throne? This is the moment. Talleyrand steps forward, his limp barely perceptible. He does not prevaricate, he does not flatter. He simply states a fact. Sire, France finds herself in complete agreement with Austria and Great Britain. The integrity of Saxony is paramount, and the expansion of Russia's influence so deep into Europe is a danger to the security of all. France will stand with her allies on this matter. The word hangs in the air. Allies. You watch the Tsar's face. For a moment, there is pure disbelief. Then, a flush of crimson anger creeps up his neck. He has been played. The defeated have conspired with the fearful, and they have done it behind his back. He looks from Talleyrand's impassive mask to Metternich's cool gaze. to Castlereagh's granite resolve. He sees no weakness, no room for negotiation. He sees a wall. In our history, this is the moment the Tsar blinked. Faced with this united front, he threatened, he fumed, but ultimately, he compromised. He accepted a smaller Congress Poland and allowed Prussia only a portion of Saxony. The crisis passed. The concert of Europe was born. But here, in this room, something is different. Perhaps it is the tone of Talleyrand's voice, the utter lack of deference. Perhaps it is the humiliation of being outmaneuvered by a man he despises. Or perhaps it is simply his own messianic pride, the conviction that to retreat is to betray God's plan for him. He sees the document you copied, lying on Metternich's desk, left there as if by accident. The pistol, now revealed. He understands he has not been negotiated with. He has been issued an ultimatum. To yield now is to announce to the world that Russia, the great liberator, can be cowed by a coalition of the bankrupt, the beaten, and the perfidious. His generals, the men who burned Moscow and took Paris, would never forgive him. His prestige would shatter. "You dare?" Alexander whispers, the sound more dangerous than a shout. "You dare to form a cabal against me? Against Russia?" He walks to the center of the room, his fists clenched. "I did not cross a continent, sacrificing hundreds of thousands of my subjects to be dictated to by an Austrian schemer and an English merchant, and I certainly will not be lectured on the limits of power by a traitor who served every master who would pay him." The insult to Talleyrand is a physical blow. "My army stands in Poland," the Tsar continues, his voice rising. "Another 100,000 men are on the march from Russia. If you believe this piece of paper can stop them, then you are more foolish than Napoleon." He turns not to Metternich or Castlereagh, but back to Talleyrand, recognizing him as the architect of this defiance. "You wish for a test of strength? You will have it. Let us see if the armies of a restored Bourbon can stand against the men who broke the Grande Armée." He doesn't storm out. He leaves with a chilling, deliberate calm. The door closes, and the silence in the room is absolute. The bluff has been called, and the Tsar has doubled down. The ethical tension is suffocating. Talleyrand's gambit to restore France was a masterpiece of diplomacy, but it has directly ignited a new continental war. Was the risk of Russian hegemony so great that it was worth plunging a continent, still mourning its millions of dead, back into the abyss? You look at your master, and for the first time you see not a flicker of triumph on his face, only the profound weariness of a man who knows the terrible cost of his own cleverness. The twist is the grotesque irony of it all. This new war is not a war of ideology, not revolution versus monarchy. It is a raw power struggle, born directly from the attempt to create a lasting peace. The peacemakers have become the warmongers. Within hours, the news spreads. It doesn't leak. It explodes. At a grand ball in the Rasimovsky Palace, the music falters as couriers rush in and out, their faces grim. You see the Prussian envoy, Hardenberg, in a heated conference with the Tsar's staff. Their alliance, which the secret treaty was meant to break, is now solidified by righteous fury. The waltzes stop. Gowns of silk and velvet rustle as guests cluster together, whispering in panicked tones. The Congress of Vienna is over. It has failed. By morning, the city awakens to a different reality. The talk is no longer of borders and constitutions, but of mobilization schedules and supply lines. The Russian and Prussian delegations formally withdraw from the Congress. Their armies in Poland and Saxony, which were preparing to stand down, receive new orders. Prepare for an attack from the west and south. In the Austrian headquarters, General Schwarzenberg, who had expected a peaceful retirement, is now tasked with drafting war plans against the very Russian soldiers he had fought alongside just 1 year before. French Marshal Soult, now Minister of War for Louis XVIII, receives a dispatch from Talleyrand. It is a command to halt the demobilization of the army and prepare for a campaign in Germany. The soldiers of Europe, from the Pyrenees to the Urals, who had just begun the long march home, who had dreamt of seeing their families and their fields again, are ordered to turn around. The brief, hopeful dream of peace is over. The continent held its breath after Napoleon's fall, praying for respite. Instead, it gets the War of the Viennese Frost, a conflict born of pride, fear, and a secret treaty signed in a cold room on a dark January night. You are in Prague. The year is 1817, and the city bears the scars of the armies that have passed through it. A way station for Austrian regiments marching north and a hospital for the broken men sent back south. The gilded optimism of Vienna feels like a memory from another man's lifetime. Here, in the damp halls of Prague Castle, there is no waltzing, only the grim business of counting the dead and drawing new lines in the blood. The War of the Viennese Frost has ended, not in a glorious victory or a decisive defeat, but in a ragged, gasping exhaustion. For 2 years the continent bled. It was a strange and terrible war. The French army, under the white banner of the Bourbons, found itself fighting alongside British-funded Austrian corps in Saxony. You saw the letters from the front, filled with a grim irony. Grizzled veterans of Napoleon's Grand Armée, now wearing the king's cockade, using the old familiar tactics against the very Prussian generals they had once fought alongside at Jena. It was a war of grinding attrition. Russia's manpower was limitless, but its supply lines were stretched to the breaking point. Britain's command of the sea was absolute, blockading the Baltic and strangling Russo-Prussian trade, while its subsidies, the famous Golden Cavalry of Street, James kept the Entente armies in the field, long after their national treasuries had run dry. There was no Napoleon to provide a singular focus. This was a war of committees and coalitions, of conflicting objectives and mutual suspicion. The French fought to regain prestige, the Austrians to survive, the British to maintain a balance. On the other side, the Prussians fought with a bitter nationalist fury for the prize of Saxony, while the Russians fought for their Tsar's wounded pride and his divine right to order the world. The result was a stalemate written in flesh and bone across the plains of Central Europe. No one could win. Everyone could lose more. And so, they came to Prague to sign a peace that no one wanted. Talleyrand is older now. The cynical amusement that always played at the corners of his eyes has been replaced by a deep, glacial weariness. He won his initial gamble. France is no longer a pariah. It is a key pillar of the new European order. But the order he helped create is a monster. You look across the negotiating table, not at the Tsar Alexander refused to attend, sending his hawkish foreign minister Nesselrode as a deliberate insult, but at the Prussian delegation. Their faces are masks of disciplined hatred. They see France not as a partner in peace, but as the treacherous architect of their frustrated ambitions. The Treaty of Prague is not a document of reconciliation. It is a list of grievances, given the force of international law. Poland is the festering heart of it. A new Kingdom of Poland is created. But it is a mockery. It is smaller than Alexander's grandest dream, but far larger than what Austria and Britain could stomach. Its borders are drawn with military precision, giving Russia strategic fortresses that directly threaten both Vienna and Berlin. Its king is the Tsar. Its army is commanded by his brother, the brutish Grand Duke Constantine. It is not a buffer state. It is a loaded cannon. Prussia, in turn, is granted the northern half of Saxony, a reward that feels more like an insult. They are forced to accept the continued existence of a hostile, Austrian-aligned Saxon state on their southern flank. For their loyalty to Russia, they have gained territory, but also a permanent enemy and the eternal enmity of France. This treaty does not establish a concert of Europe, a forum for the great powers to resolve disputes and maintain peace. That idea is laughed out of the room. It is a historical absurdity, a fantasy that died in the snows of 1815. Instead, the Treaty of Prague formalizes the existence of two armed, hostile, and irreconcilable blocs. You hear the diplomats in the corridors give it a name, whispered with a kind of dread. The Iron Divide. On one side stands the Russo-Prussian Axis. They are bound by a shared sense of betrayal and a common autocratic ideology. Their court philosophers speak of a sacred mission to defend the pure, traditional values of Orthodox and Lutheran monarchy against the godless, revolutionary liberalism of the West. Their alliance is one of steel, grain, and manpower, a continental fortress state, paranoid, militaristic, and ever watchful for weakness in its enemies. On the other side is the Entente of Britain, France, and Austria. It is not an alliance of friendship. It is a pact held together by the cold glue of fear. Britain, the global naval power, sees Russia as the primary threat to its imperial lifelines in Asia. Austria, the fragile multi-ethnic empire, sees Russia as the sponsor of Slavic nationalism that could tear it apart from within. And France, under its restored monarchy, sees the Axis as a permanent existential threat on its eastern frontier. It is a coalition of a naval power, a land power, and a financial power. It is pragmatic, internally suspicious, and purely defensive. The ethical tension of this new world is profound. The War of the Viennese Frost was fought, ostensibly, to prevent the domination of Europe by a single power. The goal was balance. But the peace created an even more dangerous reality. It has locked the entire continent into a permanent state of Cold War. Every political crisis, every minor border dispute, will now be seen through the prism of this great power struggle. The treaty did not end the war. It merely gave the belligerents time to reload. You helped copy the Articles of Peace, but you know you were truly drafting the charter for a century of conflict. The unexpected twist, the great geopolitical irony, is that the primary beneficiary of Europe's self-immolation is not in Europe at all. While the old world was locked in its bitter struggle, the United States of America has had 2 years of glorious, unimpeded growth. With European navies busy blockading each other and European merchants locked out of markets, American shipping has come to dominate the Atlantic. With the great powers distracted, American settlers have pushed west without fear of foreign meddling. President Monroe watches this new European order with a clear, cold eye. He sees not a community of nations to be engaged with, but 2 snarling wolf packs locked in a struggle to the death. The old world is a charnel house, a place of ancient hatreds and endless wars. America, he decides, will have no part in it. The stage is set for a far more absolute declaration of hemispheric isolation. As the final signatures are affixed to the treaty, a weak, watery sun breaks through the Prague clouds. There are no cheers. There is only the scratching of quills and the quiet rustle of paper. You look at the new map of Europe attached to the treaty. The lines are stark and unnatural. They are not the soft, organic borders of history. They are the hard, geometric lines of a military frontier. Fortresses are already being planned, garrisons reinforced, conscription quotas raised. The Iron Divide is real. It runs from the Baltic to the Alps, a scar across the face of the continent. Every nation must now choose a side. Neutrality is a death sentence. The Peace of Prague is not peace at all. It is an armistice, and everyone in the room knows it. You are in a dusty olive grove on a hillside overlooking Turin. The year is 1821. The city below is a tinderbox, and you are one of the sparks. You are a member of the Carbonari, the charcoal burners, a secret society sworn to a single, sacred idea, a united, constitutional Italy, free from the Austrian jackboot. In your hands, you hold not a farmer's musket or a rusty heirloom pistol, but a brand new Baker rifle. It feels heavy, solid, professional. The steel is cold, smelling faintly of packing grease and the sea. It was made in a factory in London, sailed to Genoa on a ship flying a French flag, and brought to you by a man who calls himself Monsieur Durand. In our history, your revolution was a brief, romantic tragedy. The Carbonari of Piedmont rose up. King Victor Emmanuel I abdicated, and the regent, Charles Albert, granted a constitution. Then, the Holy Alliance acted. An Austrian army, with the blessing of Russia and Prussia, marched into Piedmont and crushed your small, hopeful army at the Battle of Novara. The dream was extinguished in a matter of weeks. The leaders were shot, the constitution was revoked, and the Austrians tightened their grip. But the Holy Alliance does not exist in this world. There is no conservative unity, no pact of monarchs to stamp out the fires of liberalism. There is only the iron divide. And so, when you and your brothers rise up, Vienna does not receive messages of support from St. Petersburg. Instead, Metternich receives a sharp diplomatic protest from Paris and London. The Austrian army still marches, but this time, something is different. This time, you are ready for them. Monsieur Durand is your link to this new reality. He is a former colonel from Napoleon's army, a man with tired eyes and an impeccably trimmed moustache. He is not a revolutionary idealist. He is a professional. He does not speak of liberty or the rights of man. He speaks of logistics, fields of fire, and the strategic importance of Alpine passes. The French government, he told you in a hushed meeting in a wine cellar, admires the spirit of the Italian people. We cannot intervene directly. That would mean war, but a people fighting for their own self-determination, well, they deserve the tools to do the job. The tools arrive in crates marked agricultural machinery. Rifles, ammunition, a few light artillery pieces, and bags of British gold sovereigns to pay your volunteers. This is the new face of European conflict. It is not a war of grand armies and clashing banners. It is the age of sponsored insurrection. Your small rebellion, which should have been a footnote in history, becomes the first major proxy war of the 19th century. In the hills of Piedmont, your Carbonari cells, trained by French officers like Durand, wage a bitter guerrilla war against the Austrian regulars. You learn to ambush supply columns, to use the terrain, to turn the dream of a nation into the bloody work of an insurgency. Down south, in Naples, where another Carbonari revolt has erupted, British agents, advisors from the Foreign Office, organise the Neapolitan Constitutional Army, providing naval intelligence and funding to keep them in the field against another invading Austrian force. The ethical tension of your struggle is a poison that seeps into your soul. You are fighting for Italy, but your uniform is paid for by France, and your rifle is made in England. Durand makes the terms clear. The goal is a constitutional monarchy in Piedmont, friendly to Paris. A republic? Unthinkable. A radical land reform? Absolutely not. The British advisors in Naples have similar conditions. Their support is contingent on the new government granting favourable trade terms to British merchants. You are fighting to free yourself from one master, only to indebt yourself to another. Your struggle for libertar has become a pawn in the Entente's strategy of containment. You are bleeding Austria, one patrol, one convoy at a time, for the benefit of politicians in London and Paris who see your sacred cause as a line item in a geopolitical ledger. The conflict drags on. It is not the heroic war of your dreams. It is a grinding, dirty affair. Villages are burned by the Austrians as punishment for harbouring rebels. Your own forces carry out reprisals against loyalist nobles. The conflict in Italy becomes a magnet for the dispossessed and the radical of all Europe. Polish exiles, German students, Spanish liberals, all who dream of revolution and have no war of their own, come to Italy to fight. The peninsula becomes a laboratory for new theories of warfare and revolution. The unexpected twist is the utter corruption of the nationalist ideal. In our timeline, the failure of the 1,821 revolts created martyrs and a purified, romantic myth of the risorgimento that would inspire Mazzini and Garibaldi. Here, the success of the revolts, their ability to survive and fight on with foreign help, fractures the movement itself. Your Carbonari cell in Turin begins to see the Neapolitans not as Italian brothers, but as rivals backed by the British. Arguments erupt. Is the future Italy to be a centralised state under French protection, or a loose federation with British naval guarantees? The pure unifying idea of Italy is shattered by the very foreign support that keeps it alive. The movement splinters into pro-French and pro-British factions, sometimes fighting each other with more venom than they fight the Austrians. This pattern, this template of proxy war, is immediately replicated across the continent. In Spain, the Trienio Liberal is not crushed by a French invasion in 1823. Instead, the constitutional government survives with British naval support and financial aid, while the absolutist rebels in the countryside are openly armed and funded by the Russo-Prussian Axis. Spain becomes a decade-long civil war, a horrifying prequel to the conflict of the 1,930 seconds. The Carlists are not just a domestic faction, they are the chosen instrument of the Axis. The Liberals are not just reformers, they are the clients of the Entente. You stand on your hillside, the Baker rifle now comfortably familiar in your grasp. You hear the distant crackle of musketry from the valley below. You are no longer a simple patriot. You are a soldier in a war that is larger than Italy, a war whose true generals sit in Whitehall and the Quai d'Orsay, in the Hofburg and the Winter Palace. You have learned the first brutal lesson of the age of sponsored insurrection. When the great powers can no longer afford to fight each other directly, they will pay men like you to die for them instead. The dream of revolution has not been extinguished. It has been weaponized. You are on the island of Hydra, a rock jutting from the Aegean, and your world smells of salt, gunpowder, and wild thyme. It is 1,826. For 5 years, you have fought a war of ghosts and shadows. You are a cleft, a bandit patriot, and your ship, the Eleftheria, is a converted merchant brig armed with a dozen mismatched cannons. You have fought the Sultan's navy to a standstill through sheer audacity, raiding Turkish supply lines, landing fighters on the Peloponnese coast, and turning the sea itself into a weapon. But the tide is turning against you. The Sultan, enraged and impotent, has called upon his powerful vassal, Muhammad Ali of Egypt. Now, a modern fleet, commanded by the brilliant Ibrahim Pasha, is systematically burning its way through your homeland. Village by village, island by island, the revolution is being strangled. You have heard the stories of the Philhellenes, the lovers of Greece from across Europe. A few have come. You even met the English Lord Byron at Messalongi before the fever took him. He was a strange, passionate man who dreamed of a reborn Athens, a republic of philosophers and heroes. He brought money and courage, but he was one man. His dream was beautiful, but it could not stand against Egyptian cannons. Hope is a dwindling currency. Then, the first ships arrive. They are not the sleek, fast frigates of the British or the French. They are heavy, imposing Russian ships of the line, black-hulled and ominous, flying the blue-crossed saltire of Street Andrew. They do not come in ones or twos. They come as a fleet. And they do not bring poets. They bring priests. Black-robed, bearded men come ashore, their necks heavy with silver crosses. They carry icons of the Theotokos and St. George, not copies of Plato. They speak not of democracy or liberty, but of a holy duty. They call the Sultan the Haggarine usurper, and Constantinople Tsargrad. They speak to your own priests in the shared, ancient tongue of orthodoxy. This is not a mission of romantic solidarity. This is a crusade. The new Tsar in St. Petersburg, Nicholas I, a man with a gaze like Siberian ice, has declared the defense of his Orthodox brethren a sacred command. The Russian army, a green-coated glacier, begins to move across the Pruth River, grinding into the Ottoman Balkans. The change is immediate and overwhelming. Russian gold fills your empty coffers. Russian rifles, far superior to your old flintlocks, are placed in your hands. Russian naval officers, veterans of the Napoleonic Wars, come aboard your ships to advise on gunnery and fleet tactics. The war is no longer your desperate struggle. It is now a meticulously planned Russian campaign. The ethical tension is a constant bitter taste in your mouth. At a council of war, a Russian admiral, a giant of a man named Orlov, lays out the plan to trap and annihilate the Egyptian fleet. He is brilliant, his strategy flawless. But when your captain, a Hydriot patriot, who has lost 2 brothers in the fight, raises a question about the future constitution of a free Greece, Orlov simply smiles. It is a smile with no warmth. "The Tsar," he says, his voice a low rumble, "in his infinite wisdom will guide his Orthodox children. Your duty is to fight. His is to rule. You are being liberated, but your future is being written for you in a language you do not speak, in a city you have never seen. You are trading the chains of the Sultan for the silken leash of the Tsar." The campaign is a brutal success. With Russian backing, your combined fleets trap Ibrahim Pasha at Navarino Bay. But it is not the cautious, accidental battle of our history. It is a planned, systematic slaughter. The Russo-Greek fleet annihilates the Turco-Egyptian force. On land, the Russian army smashes through the Balkans, driving the Ottomans back in disarray. By 1828, they are at the gates of Adrianople. Constantinople itself, the dream of generations, is within their grasp. Victory is total. You should be celebrating. Instead, a new fear takes hold, because another fleet has appeared on the horizon. This time, it is the Royal Navy. Sleek, powerful, and utterly professional, the British warships form a line blocking the entrance to the Dardanelles. They are not flying signals of friendship. Their gun ports are open. This is the shocking, world-altering twist. In this timeline, Britain is not your reluctant ally. It is the sworn enemy of your saviour. For a century, British foreign policy has had one immutable law. Russia must not control the Turkish Straits. A Russian fleet in the Mediterranean would be a dagger aimed at the sea lanes to India, the artery of the British Empire. And so, the British, the very people whose poet died for your cause, are now here to prop up your sworn enemy, the the Ottoman Sultan, to deny Russia its prize. A furious message is sent from the British admiral to the Russian commander. Any attempt to pass the Dardanelles or to enter Constantinople will be considered an act of war against the British crown. You stand on the deck of the Eleftheria, anchored in the Sea of Marmara, and watch the impossible unfold. A few miles to your north, the gilded domes of Constantinople shimmer in the haze. Before you lies the British fleet, a wall of oak and cannon. Behind you is the triumphant Russian navy, your supposed liberators, straining at the leash. Your war of independence has become the trigger for a confrontation between empires. French and Austrian diplomats race to the scene, desperately trying to mediate, but the iron divide holds firm. France and Austria, while nervous about British naval power, are terrified of a Russian-controlled Constantinople. They back Britain. Prussia, in turn, declares its unwavering support for its Russian ally, mobilizing troops on its border with Austria to add pressure. The standoff lasts for a tense, agonizing week. Then, a Russian frigate, trying to test the blockade, is met with a warning shot from HMS Ocean. The Russian captain, perhaps on secret orders, perhaps out of sheer arrogance, returns fire. The British response is instantaneous and overwhelming. A full broadside tears into the Russian ship, leaving it a crippled, burning wreck. The Black Sea War has begun. It is a bizarre, contained conflict. There is no formal declaration of war. It is a naval war fought exclusively in the Aegean and the Black Sea. British ships, using their superior seamanship and gunnery, blockade the straits, while Russian land forces consolidate their hold on the Balkans. You, the Greek revolutionary, are now in an impossible position. The Russians demand you fight the British as their allies. The British send secret envoys, promising an autonomous Greece under Entente protection if you will turn on the Russians. You began this fight for freedom, for Eleftheria. Now you see that for the great powers, your freedom is merely a tool, a justification. The romantic dream of Byron is dead, replaced by the cold calculus of empire. Your homeland, for which you have bled for years, is no longer the prize. It is merely the battlefield. You are a lieutenant in the Moscow Guards Regiment, and the wind whipping off the Neva feels like a razor blade against your skin. It is December 1825, and St. Petersburg is a city holding its breath. Tsar Alexander is dead of a fever in the southern port of Taganrog, a city whose name has become a curse. Taganrog is the nerve center of the Black Sea War, the pointless, grinding conflict that has bled your army white for 2 years. You were in Paris in 1814, a boy ensign who saw the Tsar as a golden-haired god, the Agamemnon of Europe. Now, that god is dead, and his legacy is a stalemate against British ships and a graveyard for Russian soldiers in the mud of the Balkans. There is confusion in the capital. The rightful heir, Constantine, has renounced the throne, but the proclamation was kept secret. For weeks, you have sworn allegiance to one emperor, while another, the iron-fisted Nicholas, prepared to take power. You and your brother officers have whispered about this moment for years, in freezing watch camps and candlelit apartments. You have read the forbidden books from France. You have spoken of constitutions, of freeing the serfs, of ending the tyranny of the secret police and the deadening hand of the bureaucracy. You dreamed of forcing a constitution upon the new Tsar. But the news from the south, the endless lists of the dead for a war of wounded pride, has turned your whispers into a plan. The army is demoralized. The officer corps is seething. The moment is now. On Senate Square, the air is thick with frost and treason. Your regiment forms a hollow square. your breath pluming in the frigid air. You can see the bronze face of Peter the Great on his horse, pointing west, always west. Around you are 3,000 men, your comrades from the grenadiers and the naval crews. You are the Decembrists. In our history, you were a footnote, a tragic, noble failure. Your square stood alone. The other regiments remained loyal. Nicholas, decisive and brutal, gathered his forces and shattered you with artillery. 5 of your leaders were hanged, hundreds were exiled to Siberia. Your dream was buried in the snow. But today, the snow will be red. The difference is the war. When the Governor-General, Miloradovich, a hero of 1,812, rides out to reason with you, his words ring hollow. He speaks of honor, of loyalty to the Tsar. One of your comrades shouts back, "What honor is there in dying for a blockade? What loyalty do we owe the brother of the man who sent us to rot in the Danubian marshes?" The anger is raw, infectious. As in our history, the radical Kakovsky raises his pistol and shoots Miloradovich from his saddle. The hero falls, his blood a dark stain on the pristine snow. This is the moment of decision. In our world, this act of regicide horrified the loyalists and sealed your doom. Here, it is a spark in a powder magazine. You see the hesitation in the eyes of the officers on the other side of the square. They too have lost brothers in the south. They too have read the letters of despair from the front. They have been ordered to fire on their own comrades, not for the glory of Russia, but for a grim, unpopular new Tsar. Nicholas himself is there, a tall, imposing figure, his face a mask of fury. He gives the order to the horse guards. Charge, clear the square. The cavalrymen lower their sabres and spur their horses forward. But their charge is half-hearted. They do not crash into your square. They flow around it, some men even raising their weapons in a salute. Their hearts are not in it. Then, from behind them, a sound rolls across the square, a roar. The Pavlovsky Grenadier Regiment, which was supposed to be the bedrock of the loyalist force, is marching not against you, but for you. Their colonel, a man who lost his only son at Varna, has made his choice. The stalemate is broken. The psychological dam bursts. Soldiers begin to desert the loyalist ranks, running across the open ground to join your square. The crowd of civilian onlookers who had been watching from a distance now surges forward, their shouts mingling with the soldiers' cheers. "Constantine and Constitution!" Nicholas sees the situation is lost. His authority has evaporated in the space of an hour. You watch him, no longer a terrifying autocrat but just a man, his face pale with shock as he is hustled by his entourage back towards the Winter Palace. Your commanders, Prince Trubetskoy and the poet Ryliev, seize the moment. An order is given, and your column surges forward, a river of grey greatcoats and bayonets, no longer rebels, but the arbiters of Russia's destiny. The unexpected twist is the sheer bloody chaos of success. The revolution is not a clean surgical coup. It is a messy, violent seizure of power. There is fighting in the corridors of the Winter Palace. Some guards resist, others throw down their arms. And in the chaos, the most radical of your comrades, men from Pavel Pestel's Southern Society, who believe that a new Russia can only be built on the grave of the Romanovs, find Nicholas. He is not captured and exiled. He is cornered in the palace chapel and hacked to death with sabres. His wife and children are taken into custody, their fate uncertain. The Decembrist Revolt has not just toppled a Tsar, it has murdered one. You now stand in a city that is yours. A provisional government is declared. Ryliev, the poet, speaks of a Commonwealth of the Russian people, a name chosen to avoid the radical terror of the word republic. A constitution is promised. Serfdom is declared abolished. Peace negotiations with Britain are to begin immediately. For a single, glorious week, you believe you have won. Then, the news arrives from the rest of the empire. The generals in the south, commanding the main body of the army, declare the provisional government an illegal, regicidal junta. The Black Sea Fleet remains loyal to the Romanov dynasty, blockading Odessa. The governor of Siberia declares his allegiance to Nicholas's younger brother, Michael, as the new Tsar Michael II. The empire has not been liberated. It has been shattered. Your revolution has not brought freedom. It has brought civil war. The ethical tension becomes your daily reality. You, the lieutenant who dreamed of liberty, are assigned to the new Committee for Public Salvation. Your job is to root out royalist sympathizers in St. Petersburg. Your first assignment is to arrest a fellow officer from your own mess, a man you drank with just a month ago, because his brother is on the staff of the royalist army in the south. You hear the pleas of his wife. You see the terror in his children's eyes, and you do your duty. The committee, to survive, must be more ruthless, more efficient, and more paranoid than the Tsar's own secret police ever was. It needs grain for the army, so it sends detachments into the countryside to confiscate food from the very peasants you just freed. You stand guard at the Peter and Paul fortress, its cannons now aimed not at a foreign invader, but at the Russian heartland. The cells that were meant for you and your leaders are now filled with suspected royalists, awaiting interrogation. You have overthrown the Tsar, but in his place you have unleashed a hydra. St. Petersburg is a revolutionary island in a vast, hostile sea of monarchist Russia. The revolution for freedom has begun with an act of murder, and it will survive, if it survives at all, on a diet of terror and blood. The dream is over. The long, dark night of the Russian Civil War has just begun. You are in Washington. The year is 1827, and the city is a monument to ambitious imperfection. Grand avenues of mud connect half-finished marble buildings. The air is thick with humidity, the drone of insects, and the ceaseless chatter of politics. You are a junior clerk in the State Department, which means your days are spent in a cramped, stuffy office, copying letters for Secretary Henry Clay. Your hands are perpetually stained with ink, and you have become an expert in deciphering the scrawled reports from American envoys in the capitals of a Europe that seems to be consuming itself. The dispatches you copy are a litany of horrors. From St. Petersburg, letters smuggled through Finland speak of the Commonwealth government executing royalist generals and fighting a brutal war of attrition against monarchist armies in the Ukraine. From Madrid, the reports detail a civil war of almost unimaginable cruelty, with British-backed liberals and Russian-backed absolutists hanging priests and intellectuals from the same village trees. From Turin, you read of the endless, grinding insurgency that has turned the beautiful hills of Piedmont into a charnel house. Europe is not at peace. It is not even at war. It is a continent suffering from a wasting sickness, a contagion of proxy conflicts and ideological hatreds. Today, you are summoned to the President's house. You carry a portfolio of the most recent dispatches. You walk through the doors into a world of quiet, intellectual intensity. President John Quincy Adams greets you not with a politician's smile, but with a curt, analytical nod. He is a man who seems carved from New England granite, cold, brilliant, and utterly devoid of sentiment. With him is your boss, Henry Clay, the Kentuckian, all fire and passion where Adams is ice and logic. Show him the letter from Bogota, Clay says, his voice tight with frustration. You hand the dispatch to the president. It is from the American minister to Gran Colombia. He reports that a British trade delegation, which included several decorated naval officers, has offered President Bolívar a treaty of mutual defense and a generous loan to modernize his army. The subtext is clear. Become a client of the Entente. Another dispatch, this one from Mexico City, is even more alarming. An agent claiming to represent the true Tsar in the Russian south has been making inquiries about restoring the old Russian forts in California, offering military support against potential American expansion in exchange for a Pacific port. The Iron Divide is not staying in Europe. Its tentacles are reaching across the Atlantic. The great powers, unable to strike directly at each other, are looking for new arenas, new pawns. They see the young, fragile republics of the Americas as a fresh chessboard. Bolivar will not accept, Adams says, his voice flat. He has finished the letter in a single, sweeping glance. He is too proud. But others will not be. The Brazilians, the Argentines, they will be tempted. Europe will bring its disease here. We must act, Clay insists, pacing the room. We must stand with our sister republics. We must form a League of the Americas, a Pan-American system to resist the old world's corruption, an alliance for liberty. This was Clay's grand vision. The American system projected onto the hemisphere. In our history, the Monroe Doctrine was its first cautious expression, a unilateral declaration, quietly backed by the British Navy, that warned a unified Holy Alliance against reconquest. But here, Adams shakes his head. An alliance? He asks, his voice cutting. With whom shall we ally? The British, who would use us to weaken Russia. The Russians, who would see our own republic torn down. You speak of sister republics, Mr. Clay. They are weak, unstable, and will soon be puppets in Europe's games. An alliance would not project our strength. It would import their wars. The president walks to a large globe in the corner of the room. He gives it a slow spin. In 1823, my predecessor warned a united Europe against intervention. But Europe is not united. It is a rabid dog that has torn itself in two. There is no single threat to warn against. There are two, and they are coming for us from both sides. He stops the globe with his finger on Washington. We cannot police this hemisphere. We cannot fight the Royal Navy and the Russian army. We cannot play their game. So, we will play our own. This is the birth of a new doctrine, forged not in confidence, but in a cold assessment of profound threat. You listen, transfixed, as Adams lays out the logic. America will not lead a League of Republics. It will withdraw. It will build a wall. The policy, as it is drafted over the next few weeks, is given a name that is both poetic and chilling: the Doctrine of Continental Solitude. It is far more radical than the Monroe Doctrine ever was. It is not a warning, it is a divorce. First, it declares the entire Western Hemisphere, from the Arctic to Cape Horn, as a sphere separate from the political and military affairs of the Old World. Any attempt by a European power to form a military alliance, establish a protectorate, or intervene in the affairs of any American nation will be viewed as a direct threat to the peace and safety of the United States. Second, and this is the radical departure, it pledges that the United States will, in turn, observe a policy of absolute and total non-involvement in European affairs. No alliances, no mediation, no diplomatic protests, no aid, no trade in war materials with any belligerent. America will turn its back on Europe entirely. Clay argues furiously against this second point. It is a betrayal, he thunders in one meeting. We are the first republic. We have a moral duty to support the cause of liberty in Spain, in Italy, in the streets of St. Petersburg. We have a moral duty to survive. Adams counters, his voice dangerously quiet. Our liberty is a flame in a hurricane. To expose it to the storm is not courage. It is suicide. We will tend our own garden. Let the rest of the world burn if it must. The ethical tension is sickening. You, a child of the revolution, have been raised on the ideals of Paine and Jefferson, the idea that America should stand by and watch while liberals are crushed in Spain, while a nascent Russian republic fights for its life, feels like a profound moral failure. It is a doctrine of supreme national selfishness, cloaked in the language of prudence. You are abandoning the world in order to save yourself. The unexpected twist is how this doctrine of solitude becomes a license for rapacious ambition. By declaring the Americas a closed system, Adams is not protecting the Latin American republics. He is isolating them. He is cutting them off from potential European protectors and rivals, leaving them alone in a hemisphere with a single rapidly growing predator, the United States itself. The doctrine of continental solitude is a cage, and while it keeps the European wolves out, it leaves the fox in charge of the henhouse. When the doctrine is announced, the European reaction is one of bewildered contempt. The British ambassador reportedly laughed, calling it the pronouncements of a hermit kingdom with delusions of grandeur. The Russian royalist envoy called it a pathetic attempt to legislate geography. They do not see the long-term strategic genius of the move. They see only a minor power removing itself from the board. But you see it. You are there when Clay, having lost the argument but now tasked with executing the policy, unrolls a map of North America. His finger traces the vast, sparsely populated territories of northern Mexico, Tejas, Nuevo Mexico, Alta California. If there are to be no European players in this hemisphere, he says to you, his voice low and hungry, then we must ensure there is only one strong one. The doctrine of continental solitude does not lead to a peaceful, isolated America. It leads to an America that turns its expansionist energies inward upon its neighbors, with an unhindered, unapologetic ruthlessness. The path to Texas, to California, to Oregon, is now clear of European complications. The dream of manifest destiny is no longer a romantic notion. It is now the central, guiding principle of national strategy, a strategy born from the fear of a world gone mad. You are at the University of Jena, and the air in the tavern is thick with pipe smoke, the smell of spilled beer, and the fever of youth. It is 1830. You and your friends, members of the Burschenschaft Teutonia, see yourselves as the future of a nation that does not yet exist. On the wall hangs a hand-painted flag, 3 horizontal stripes of black, red, and gold, the colours of the Lützow Free Corps, who fought Napoleon, the colours of a future, united, and free Germany. You read Schiller and Fichte. You sing songs of brotherhood and freedom. You drink to the day when the 38 German states will dissolve into one glorious Reich. Your Bible is the memory of the Wartburg Festival of 1817. You were just a boy then, but the older students speak of it with a holy reverence. On that day, 500 of them gathered at the historic castle, a symbol of German identity, to celebrate the anniversary of the Reformation and the Battle of Leipzig. They burned reactionary books and the symbols of the petty princes who carved up your homeland. It was a single, pure expression of hope, a promise. In our world, that promise was suppressed. The Holy Alliance, through the Carlsbad decrees, clamped down on the universities, censored the press, and drove the nationalist movement underground. But here, there is no Holy Alliance. There is only the Iron Divide, and for a decade, that has created a strange and deceptive paralysis in Germany. Austria and Prussia, the 2 great German powers, are too busy watching each other across the frontier to effectively suppress you. Metternich's spies are everywhere in the south, yes, but they are looking for Prussian agents, not just student radicals. The Prussian police are notoriously brutal, but their primary obsession is with French influence, not nationalist poetry. In this gap, in this stalemate, Your dream has been allowed to fester and grow. Then comes the news. Like a lightning strike from a clear sky. A revolution in Paris. The Bourbons have fallen. The Tricolour flies again over the Tuileries. In 3 glorious days, the people have asserted their will. The news electrifies your tavern. You leap onto the tables, beer steins crashing to the floor. This is it. The signal. What Paris did in July, Germany will do in August. The princes will tremble. The people will rise. Einigkeit und Recht und Freiheit. Unity and justice and freedom. But the response, when it comes, is not the single glorious uprising you dreamed of. It is a terrifying, schizophrenic convulsion. In Stuttgart, the capital of Württemberg, students and liberals march in the streets, and the king, mindful of his French and Austrian patrons, reluctantly grants a more liberal constitution. You get letters from friends in Heidelberg, in Baden, describing a similar scene. The black, red, gold flag is unfurled with the cautious approval of the authorities. This is the Entente response liberalism as a political tool, a way for the southern German states to demonstrate their alignment with Paris and Vienna, and to inoculate themselves against Prussian influence. The news from the north is a cold shock. From Leipzig, in the Prussian-dominated half of Saxony, the response is not reform but repression. Prussian observers, a full infantry battalion, march into the city to assist the local authorities. Student leaders are arrested in the dead of night. Presses are smashed. The black and white flag of Prussia is hoisted over the university. From Berlin, the king issues a proclamation, written in the language of paranoia and steel. He condemns the French disease and vows to defend the true German virtues of order, loyalty, and piety. With blood and iron if necessary. The Iron Divide, which had been a line on a map, a diplomat's abstraction, has just become a wall through the heart of your life. A friend you had planned to visit in Leipzig is now unreachable. A book printed in Stuttgart is now seditious contraband in Berlin. The German Confederation, that hollow shell of a government, officially dissolves in a flurry of mutual recriminations. It was never a state. Now, it is not even an idea. You live in the German Shatterlands. The ethical tension is the slow, sickening corruption of your own ideal. To promote the cause of a united Germany, you must now choose a side in a conflict that is not German. You travel to a new festival at Wartburg Castle, hoping to recapture the spirit of 1817. But it is a disaster. Students have come from all over the Shatterlands, but they are no longer brothers. The Bavarians and Badeners come dressed in the French style, speaking of constitutional rights and secularism. They praise the southern princes for their enlightened reforms. The Prussians and Saxons come in stark military-style tunics. They speak of duty, of sacrifice, of the French menace, and of the sacred bond between soldier and king. The black, red, gold flag of your movement is mocked by the Prussians as a symbol of French collaboration. The Prussian black and white is decried by the Southerners as the banner of Russian slavery. The debate in the Great Hall descends into a screaming match. It is not about how to unite Germany. It is about which half of a divided Germany is the true one. The climax comes when a Prussian student, his face scarred from dueling, leaps onto a table and sets a French tricolour alight. "This is the flag of your liberal Germany," he spits. A student from Heidelberg throws a beer stein, and the hall explodes into a chaotic brawl. You see boys who sang songs together a year ago now, trying to gouge each other's eyes out. The dream of brotherhood dies right there, on the stone floor, amidst the wreckage of broken chairs and broken hopes. The unexpected twist is the tragic mutation of German nationalism. The idea of Germany does not die. It splinters. It becomes two hostile, competing ideologies. In the south, under the patronage of the Entente, a Western German identity forms. It is liberal in politics, Catholic or secular in spirit, and sees itself as the inheritor of the Holy Roman Empire, a civilized bastion against the barbaric Prusso-Russian alliance. Its rallying cry is civilization. In the north, under the thumb of the Axis, a Prussian German identity hardens. It is autocratic, militaristic, and fiercely Lutheran. It sees itself as a disciplined, martial race, the only defense against the decadent, revolutionary chaos of France and the cynical machinations of Austria. Its rallying cry is fatherland. These are not just political positions. They become rival cultures. They develop their own distinct literatures, their own historians, their own myths. To be a German is no longer a matter of language or birth. It is a political choice. Are you a civilization German or a fatherland German? You leave Wartburg, your heart a cold, heavy stone in your chest. The road back to Jena is dotted with new checkpoints. At the border of the Duchy of Weimar and the Prussian-controlled territory of Erfurt, you are stopped by soldiers. A young officer, no older than you, rifles through your books. He pulls out a volume of Rousseau. He looks at you with a mixture of pity and contempt. "You read this French filth?" he asks. He tosses the book onto a bonfire where other forbidden works are already burning. You say nothing. You have made your choice. Or rather, it has been made for you by geography. You are a Westerner. And that boy, in the black and white uniform, the boy who speaks your language and read the same fairy tales as a child, is now your enemy. The German Shatterlands are not just a place on a map. They are a state of mind. A permanent civil war of the soul. You are in Paris, and the city is a symphony of shattered glass and song. It is the end of July, 1830, and the air, thick with the gunpowder and plaster dust of revolution, tastes like wine. For 3 days, you have lived on nothing but adrenaline, stale bread, and a savage, ecstatic joy. You are a journalist for Le National, a young man who has written countless editorials decrying the suffocating piety and aristocratic arrogance of King Charles X. Now, you have reported on history from behind a barricade of overturned carts and ripped-up cobblestones, a rusty fowling piece in one hand and a notebook in the other. The white flag of the Bourbons has been torn from the Tuileries Palace. The tricolour, your flag, the flag of the people, flies in its place. A splash of defiant colour against the summer sky. The king has fled. The fighting is over. The question that hangs in the air, more potent than the smoke, is, what comes next? You find yourself swept along with the crowd towards the Hôtel de Ville, the symbolic heart of every Parisian revolution. The mood is triumphant, but dangerously volatile. You see students, printers, shopkeepers, and the grim-faced men from the slums, the sans-culottes of this new age, their arms still bearing the powder burns of the fighting. They did not risk their lives to replace one king with his slightly more liberal cousin. They risked their lives for an idea. Inside, the great hall is a chaotic swirl of frock coats and military uniforms. You see the moderates, the bankers and lawyers like Adolphe Thiers, huddled in a corner, their faces pale with anxiety. They have a plan: to offer the throne to the Duke of Orléans, Louis Philippe, a man who can reassure the propertied classes and the other powers of Europe that this was a mere correction, not a true revolution. You hear them whispering of stability, of constitutional order, of avoiding the excesses of 1793. Then you see him, the living legend, the Marquis de Lafayette. He is an old man now, a ghost from a heroic age. But his presence still commands reverence. He is the bridge between the American Revolution and your own, the man of two worlds. The moderates cluster around him, begging him to endorse their plan, to present Louis-Philippe to the people from the balcony. It is the safe, prudent, and sensible path. It is the path our history took. But here, a different voice cuts through the clamour. It belongs to Godefroy Cavaignac, a man whose face seems etched with the memory of his father's exile and his brother's imprisonment. He is a Republican, a true believer, and he is not alone. He is flanked by veterans of the secret societies, men who have spent their lives in the shadows, plotting for this very day. Citizens, Cavaignac's voice rings out, silencing the room. We have torn down a throne. Shall we now build another in its place? We have chased out a king who ruled by divine right. Shall we now invite one who will rule by the grace of the stock exchange? A roar of approval comes from the National Guardsmen and students who have packed the back of the hall. The blood on the streets is the blood of the people, not the bankers, he continues, his voice trembling with passion. And the people demand not a new master, but no masters at all. They demand a republic. Lafayette hesitates. You watch his face, a battleground of memory and caution. He remembers the terror of 1793, but he also remembers the glory of Valmy. He looks at the anxious faces of the bankers, and then at the fierce, hopeful eyes of the young men who just won the revolution. He is a man of symbols, and he knows a powerful one is being forged in this room. He makes his choice. He does not turn to the moderates. He turns to Cavaignac and embraces him. Vive la République, he declares. The room explodes. The moderates' plan shatters. A group of young Republicans with Lafayette at their head walks onto the balcony. Below, the square is a sea of expectant faces. When they hear the word Republic, a sound erupts that is not a cheer, but a physical shockwave of human emotion. You, standing below, feel it in your bones. It is the sound of a dream resurrected from the grave. This is not the cautious July monarchy. This is the second tricolour, the birth of the radical, unapologetic Gallic Republic. The Republic's first actions are swift and defiant. Its new motto is not just liberty, equality, fraternity, but liberty, equality, fraternity, or death to tyrants. Its anthem is not a polite hymn, but the full, blood-throated version of the Marseillaise. And its foreign policy is not one of reassurance, but of crusade. The unexpected twist is the sheer, messianic fervour of this new state. It sees itself as having a sacred duty to tear down the entire order established at the Treaty of Prague. The new Minister of Foreign Affairs, a radical journalist you once shared a desk with, delivers a speech that sends shockwaves across Europe. He formally renounces the treaties of 1817. He announces the formation of Legions of Liberation, volunteer forces to be sent to assist our brothers in the German Shatterlands and the Italian peninsula in their struggle against autocracy. The covert policy of sponsored insurrection is over. This is the overt policy of exporting revolution by force of arms. This new reality creates an immediate, agonizing ethical tension for you. You are a patriot. You believe in the Republic, but the government you champion begins to adopt the very tools of the tyrants it decries. To fund the legions, a patriotic tax is levied on the wealthy, a move that feels perilously close to confiscation. To ensure unity, a Committee of Republican Vigilance is established, and newspapers deemed defeatist or reactionary are shut down. Your own editor is warned to moderate his tone after publishing a mild critique of the conscription laws. You came to journalism to speak truth to power. But now you find yourself censoring your own words for the good of a cause you believe in. The Republic, born in a cry for freedom, is now demanding silence and obedience. You go to the Champ de Mars to watch the First Legion of Liberation receive its standards. It is a glorious spectacle. Thousands of young men, fired with revolutionary zeal, are presented with new tricolour flags. They are marching east, to the Rhine, to free the southern German states. You feel a surge of pride. This is the France you dreamed of. Strong, proud, a beacon of liberty for the entire world. But then, you talk to one of the new legionnaires, a boy from your own neighbourhood. He is not a political idealist. He is an unemployed weaver who signed up because the army pays and feeds him. You read the first reports trickling back from the frontier. The Legion has crossed into the Palatinate, one of the liberal civilization German states. They were not greeted with flowers and embraces. They were met with suspicion and fear. The Germans, it turns out, while hating their Prussian rivals, have no desire to be liberated by their ancient French enemy. The Legion's requisitions of food are seen not as contributions to a common cause, but as the familiar plunder of an invading army. The French universalism of your revolution has crashed headlong into the stubborn particularism of German nationalism. The liberators are already being called occupiers. You stand in your office late at night. The press is rumbling below. You are writing an editorial, a piece of soaring propaganda celebrating the march of the legions. It is what is expected of you. It is what the Committee of Republican Vigilance demands. But your hand hesitates over the page. But is it free? And in its quest to liberate the world, is it not in danger of becoming the very thing it sought to destroy? You are in Blackwood, a town huddled in a West Riding valley, and the sound you hear is the sound of a conquered god. It is the rhythmic, thunderous clatter of the power looms in the Arrow Mill, but the sound is different now. It is no longer the master's heartbeat, counting out the seconds of your life in shillings and pence. It is yours. You are a wool comber, a man whose skilled hands were destined for the scrap heap of progress. Now, you are a member of the Blackwood Weavers' Council, and you help decide the rhythm of this iron beast. The year is 1832. In London, they call your home the Insurgent Shires. They speak of General Ludd's army, not as a ghost of the past, but as a living, breathing power that has severed the industrial heart of England from the body of the state. They do not understand. You did not set out to build a new world. You only set out to save the one you had. It began, as it always did, with a new machine, a shearing frame that could do the work of 10 skilled men and do it worse. In the old history, your protests, the nighttime raids, the smashed frames, the letters signed by the mythical Ned Ludd, were met with the full, undivided force of the British state. 12,000 soldiers, more than Wellington had in Spain, were sent to hunt men like you down. Spies, trials, mass hangings at York. The movement was broken, its memory surviving only in folk songs and whispered warnings. But the state that faced you was a different beast. It was a state stretched thin, its coffers drained by 2 decades of unending Cold War. Its best regiments were not in Yorkshire. They were garrisoning a restive Ireland, watching the radical new French Republic across the Channel, or sweating on warships in the Mediterranean, blockading the Dardanelles. The taxes needed to fund this global stalemate had already pushed your communities to the breaking point. When the mill owners called for troops, the government sent a handful of weary militia companies. Not an army. Their suppression was clumsy and incomplete. Raids failed. Informants were found in ditches with their throats cut. The local magistrates, terrified of the popular fury, would not convict. And so, your movement did not break. It learned. It adapted. Smashing a machine was a protest. Smashing a machine and then taking the mill, that was a revolution. It happened here, at the Arrow Mill. After a night of frame breaking, instead of melting back into the moors, you stayed. You barricaded the gates, you posted lookouts, and when the owner returned with a few hired constables, he found 1,000 men and women from the town waiting for him, armed with pikes, clubs, and a chilling silence. He fled. The mill was yours. That was the spark. The model spread like wildfire across the north. From the cotton mills of Lancashire to the hosiery workshops of Nottingham, workers did not just strike, they occupied. They took control, and in the vacuum of a state too weak and distracted to stop them, you began to govern yourselves. You formed the Luddite Commonwealths. Life here in Blackwood is hard, but it is a life of dignity. The Weavers' Council, of which you are a member, runs the mill. There is no owner to take the profits. The cloth you produce is traded with other Commonwealths' wool from Blackwood for coal from a pit near Barnsley, or for shoes made by the cordwainers of Northampton. You issue your own currency. Labour notes printed on a seized press, redeemable at the communal storehouse for bread, cheese and beer. You have your own militia. Men who drill on the green with pikes and old muskets, ready to defend the town. You have even started a school where children are taught not just to read the Bible, but to read Thomas Paine, and to understand the workings of the looms that will one day be theirs to command. The ethical tension of your world is woven into every bolt of cloth you produce. A delegate has arrived from a Commonwealth in Manchester. He brings a proposal to the council. He has plans, smuggled out of America, for a new type of automated loom, the Roberts loom, a machine of terrifying efficiency. He argues that if you adopt it, under worker control, you could outproduce the loyalist mills in the south, flood the market with cheap cloth, and use the profits to arm your militias and expand your influence. It is a compelling argument. It is the logic of progress, of power. You speak against it. We did not begin this fight for cheaper cloth. You tell the council, your voice echoing in the cold meeting hall. We began it for the sake of men. This machine, you point to the diagram, is designed to make skill worthless. It is designed to be operated by a child. If we build it, we become the very thing we despise. We will have a commonwealth of machine tenders, not of craftsmen. We will have won the mill, but lost the soul of our trade. The debate rages for a day and a night. It is the central question of your existence. Do you use the tools of the enemy to win and risk becoming him in the process? Or do you hold true to your principles and accept a life of virtuous, besieged poverty? The council votes. The Manchester man's proposal is rejected. This is the unexpected, tragic twist of your success. Your revolution, born in opposition to a certain kind of technology, has enshrined technological stagnation as a moral principle. The Luddite Commonwealths become islands of artisanal excellence in a rising sea of mass production. You produce the finest woolen cloth in the world, every thread a testament to human skill. But you cannot make enough of it. Your life is secure, communal, and dignified. It is also static. In London, in Bristol, in the shipyards of the Clyde, where the writ of the king still runs, innovation continues, driven by the ceaseless demands of the naval race against the Axis. New chemical processes, new metallurgical techniques, new engines. The world outside your valley is moving faster and faster, while you have chosen to stand still. The government in London has settled on a policy of containment. They cannot destroy you, but they can isolate you. They build a ring of constabulary forts around the insurgent shires. They make it illegal to trade with you. Those smugglers and sympathetic merchants always find a way through. They portray you in their newspapers as savages, wreckers of progress, a cautionary tale of what happens when the lower orders are left to their own devices. You stand on the ridge above Blackwood as evening falls. The smoke from the town's chimneys rises straight into the still air. You can hear the muffled, familiar thunder of your looms. You feel a profound sense of peace, of belonging. You are a free man in a free town, but as you look south towards the dark horizon, you can sometimes see a faint, unnatural glow in the sky. It is the gaslights of a loyalist city, a city of progress and squalor, of innovation and misery. It is a world you have rejected, and you wonder, with a fear that is as cold and sharp as the northern wind, if in rejecting its sins, you have also rejected its future. You are clinging to the side of a mountain in the Andes, and you feel like a fly on the wall of God. Below you, the world dissolves into a dizzying abyss of green jungle and white cloud. Above, condors circle in a sky of impossible blue. The air is so thin, it hurts to breathe. You are a cartographer and engineer, one of the hundreds in the service of the new state, and your task is to draw a line on a map. But not just any line. This will be the path of the Great Andean Road, a highway of stone and grit that will bind the coastal plains of Venezuela to the high plateau of Quito, the artery of a nation that has no business existing. It is 1,834. The state is called the Gran Colombia Confederation. In Europe, they call it Bolivar's Folly. In Washington, they call it a temporary anomaly. But here, in the thin, cold air, it feels real, solid, and eternal. You were a boy when the liberator, Simón Bolívar, drove the Spanish from this continent. You were a young man when, in our history, his great project collapsed under the weight of its own contradictions. The centrifugal forces of regionalism, the ambitions of lesser generals like Páez and Santander, and Bolívar's own despair tore the dream apart, leaving a trail of weak, squabbling republics ripe for exploitation. But the world outside your continent changed, and that changed everything. The news from Europe was not of a stable concert of powers seeking new markets, but of a madhouse of proxy wars and ideological crusades. The news from North America was not of a sister republic eager to trade, but of a hermit state, locked in a continental solitude that was merely a cover for its own brutal, methodical expansion into Mexican territory. Bolívar, the liberator, saw this new world with the terrible clarity of a prophet. He convened the leaders of the fledgling republics in Panama. He did not speak of rights and constitutions. He pointed to a map of Poland, a nation devoured by its neighbours. He spoke of the German Shatterlands. He laid out the dispatches detailing the slow-motion vivisection of the Qing Empire by British opium merchants. His message was not an appeal to idealism. It was a command for survival. "We unite!" he thundered, his voice echoing in the hall. "Or we shall be erased from the map of the world. Fear is a more powerful glue than fraternity." They listened. The Confederation was born, not from a shared dream of liberty, but from a shared nightmare of annihilation. And Bolívar, who in our world died a broken man, found a new purpose. He was no longer just the liberator. He became the protector, the unifier, the presidente vitalicio, the president for life. Your task, building this road, is a physical manifestation of his will. You are not just conquering the landscape, you are conquering the very idea of separation. Every league of road you survey, every bridge you plan, is a nail in the coffin of regionalism. It is a holy work. Back in the capital, Santa Fe de Bogotá. You are summoned to the presidential palace. The city is being rebuilt, its Spanish colonial architecture now interspersed with the severe neoclassical lines of new ministries and academies. It is a capital that is trying to look the part. Bolívar himself is aged. The fire of his youth has banked into a steady, intense glow. He is thinner, his face a mask of exhaustion and iron will. He greets you with a handshake that is surprisingly firm. He unrolls your maps, his long, elegant fingers tracing the line you have drawn. The Romans built roads like this, he says, his voice a low murmur, and their empire lasted 1,000 years. Not because the people loved each other, but because the legions could march from Britain to Judea without breaking step. Our legions are our engineers, our school teachers, our doctors. This is the ethical tension at the heart of the Bolivarian shield. To save the Republic, Bolívar has had to kill republicanism. There is a constitution, but it grants the president emergency powers that are permanent. There is an assembly, but its members are appointed, not elected. The press is not free. It is an instrument of the state, tasked with promoting unity and celebrating the protector's vision. You once had dinner with an old friend, a poet and journalist, who dared to publish a pamphlet questioning the wisdom of the presidency for life. You have not seen him in a month. His newspaper office is boarded up. When you ask about him, you are met with shrugs and nervous glances. You are building a great nation, a strong nation, a nation that can stand against the wolves of the old world. But it is not a free one. The president points to the narrowest part of the map, the Isthmus of Panama. This is the next task, he says. Humboldt himself said it could be done. A canal, a slice through the spine of the world. The state will fund it, the army will dig it. It will be our pyramid, our monument. It will bind the two great oceans, and all the trade of the world will pay us tribute. It is a breathtaking, almost insane vision, a project that, in our world, would not be completed for another 80 years, a project that would require technology that has not yet been invented. But looking into Bolívar's eyes, you do not doubt that he will try. And this is the unexpected twist, the consequence of a world in chaos. The Gran Colombia Confederation does not just survive. It becomes a beacon. It is the only major power in the world that is not aligned with either the Entente or the Axis. It is a third pole, a haven. While Europe's brightest minds are conscripted into armies or silenced by censors, and America's gaze is turned inward, Bolívar's confederation actively recruits them. You meet a German geologist, a fugitive from the Prussian police, who is now mapping the mineral wealth of the Andes. An Italian doctor, a former Carbonari, is establishing a national health service. A French political theorist, disgusted by the radicalism of the Gallic Republic, is helping to write the new civil code. They are all drawn by the promise of a grand project, the chance to build a new world from scratch, far from the ruins of the old. The Confederation becomes a strange and vibrant fusion of Andean culture, Spanish tradition, and the most advanced, ruthless minds of Europe. It develops its own political philosophy, Bolivarianism, a practical ideology of state-led development, centralized authority, and fierce non-alignment. As you are leaving the palace, you see a new delegation waiting in the antechamber. They are not Europeans. They are dark-skinned men in vibrant robes. You learn they are envoys from the Emperor of Ethiopia, who has heard of this new state that defies the European powers. They have come to learn, to study the model. You walk out into the crisp mountain air of Bogotá. You came here to build a road. You now understand you are helping to build an empire, an empire of the South, a new kind of civilization for a new and broken age. You have traded your friend's liberty for this grand, terrifying, and hopeful vision, and as you look up at the snow-capped peaks that ring the city, you do not know if you have made a pact with a devil or a saint. You are in a windowless room in Deptford, and the air you breathe tastes of hot metal, ozone, and damp wool. Outside, the London fog, thick with the coal smoke of a nation perpetually on a war footing, presses against the bricked-up walls. But the true fog is in here. It is a fog of numbers, a storm of logic, and at its heart, thundering like a captive demon, is the engine. They do not call it a computer. That word is for the men upstairs, the human calculators who check the machine's work with their slates and pencils. They call it the analytical engine. You, a classicist by training and a cryptographer by necessity, have a different name for it. You call it the Jacquard loom of thought, for it weaves patterns, not from thread, but from the raw stuff of human intelligence. And its architect, the irascible, brilliant, and perpetually frustrated Charles Babbage, is its tormented high priest. It is a monster of brass and pewter and gunmetal, a city of gears and columns stretching the length of this repurposed naval warehouse. 1,000 polished shafts spin in hypnotic unison. 10,000 geared wheels click and whir. Counting, comparing, remembering. It is not silent. It roars. It is the sound of a steam-powered god thinking, and you are one of the few mortals permitted to interpret its prayers. Your job is to feed it. You translate the complexities of the world into a language it can understand. A cascade of stiff cardboard cards, each one perforated with a precise pattern of holes. This is the language of pure logic. A hole is a truth. No hole is a falsehood. There is no poetry here, no ambiguity. The need for this deafening oracle was born from the ceaseless, grinding attrition of the Iron Divide. For 20 years, Britain has been locked in this Cold War. Victory will not come from a grand battle, but from a marginal gain, a fractional advantage. And right now, the advantage belongs to the Gallic Republic. Their agents in Britain are using a new cipher, a diabolically clever system based on the line and stanza structure of revolutionary poetry. It is a cipher with a soul, organic and maddeningly irregular. The human code breakers are stumped, and a Franco-Austrian fleet is massing near Malta. The Admiralty needs to know its destination. It needs to know now. Your direct superior is not Babbage, who speaks only to his machine, but Augusta Ada, Countess of Lovelace. She is a woman out of time, a mind of pure crystalline logic housed in the frail body of an aristocrat. She alone sees the engine not as a calculator, but as something more. It is a machine that can operate on symbols, she told you once, her dark eyes burning with an intensity that frightened you. And numbers are but one kind of symbol. We can teach it to weave algebra, to compose music. We are teaching it to think. Together, you and Ada have been trying to teach it to read poetry. Not to understand it, but to dissect it, to map its rhythms and structures onto the unforgiving grid of mathematics. You spend weeks translating Baudelaire and Hugo into punch cards, reducing sublime verse to a binary code. It feels like a desecration, like pinning a butterfly to a board. This is the ethical tension of your life. In order to save the culture you love, you must first murder it, dismember its beauty, and feed its corpse to a machine of brass and steam. The breakthrough comes on a Tuesday. After 100 failed attempts, the engine begins to clatter in a new, steady rhythm. A series of cards begins to emerge from the output slot. You snatch them up. They are not gibberish. You hold them up to the light, your hands trembling. The holes correspond to letters. decrypted letters, convoy, Gibraltar, delay, engine, failure. You run the message upstairs. Within an hour, a squadron of the Royal Navy steams from Portsmouth, not for Malta, but west, towards the Straits of Gibraltar. A week later, you read a sanitized report in the Times about a successful naval exercise. You know the truth. You have prevented a disaster. You feel a surge of triumph, but it is cold, metallic, like the machine itself. You have become an accomplice to a new kind of warfare, one fought not with courage, but with computation. You sit in your windowless room and see the world not as a place of people, but as a system of inputs and outputs. You have helped create an all-seeing eye, and you fear the cold gaze it is turning upon the world. This is where the unexpected twist catches you, a twist born from Ada's restless, visionary mind. With the French cipher broken, the engine is momentarily idle, but Ada cannot bear to see it silent. A war is not won by defense alone, she tells you, her voice low and conspiratorial. It is won by efficiency. Our nation is a machine, is it not? A grand engine of factories, ships and farms. But it is inefficient. It has friction. All too. Parto, her new project is audacious. She tasks you with gathering data, not from foreign spies, but from your own government. Census records, tax rolls, factory outputs from the Loyalist shires, shipping manifests from Liverpool and Bristol, grain prices from the Corn Exchange. For months, you and a team of clerks convert the entire British economy into punch cards. It is the most comprehensive survey of a nation ever attempted. You are creating a perfect, numerical mirror of your country. The goal is to find the friction, the inefficiencies that are holding back the war effort. You feed the mountain of cards into the engine. For a day and a night, it thunders, louder than ever before, the whole building vibrating with the force of its calculations. Babbage is ecstatic, racing along the machine's length, shouting adjustments to his engineers. Ada is preternaturally calm, watching the gears as a chess master watches the board. Finally it stops. A single card emerges. Ada takes it. She studies it for a moment, her expression unreadable. Then she hands it to you. It does not contain words. It is a series of coordinates, a map reference, and a set of numbers representing lost productivity, wasted manpower, and suboptimal resource allocation, calculated to 5 decimal places. You take the card to the mapping room. You find the coordinates. They point to a cluster of towns in the West Riding of Yorkshire. Towns you know: Blackwood, Huddersfield, towns in the heart of the Luddite Commonwealths. You feel a cold dread creep up your spine. The engine has not identified a French spy ring or a Russian plot. It has identified your own countrymen as the greatest source of friction in the national machine. It has processed the data. Their artisanal production methods are inefficient. Their isolation from the national economy is a drag on growth. Their refusal to adopt new technologies is a strategic vulnerability. The government's policy of containment, the machine has calculated, is a costly error. The cold, irrefutable logic of the numbers on the card points to a single, optimal solution. The Commonwealths must be brought to heel, their mills seized and modernized, their workforce integrated into the national industrial effort. By force, if necessary. You look at the card in your hand. This small piece of perforated cardboard is a death warrant for a way of life, delivered with the serene mathematical certainty of an axiom. You built a weapon to fight an external enemy. You have now discovered that its true power, its most terrifying application, is to turn inward. It is a perfect instrument of control. a tool to optimize a nation by identifying and eliminating its human imperfections. The information age has been born not in a university, but here, in this secret temple of war. And its first commandment is that anything which cannot be measured does not matter. You are a ghost, and you live on a ghost ship. The ship is the Hercules, a rotting naval hulk stripped of its masts and guns, permanently anchored in the humid, brackish waters of the Pearl River Delta. You are one of 24 Englishmen here, and you govern an empire of smoke from this floating warehouse. The year is 1838. Your ghost ship is a receiving station, and your kingdom is built from thousands upon thousands of dark, sticky balls of Bengali opium. Life is a languid, profitable purgatory. By day, you supervise the Chinese clerks, their abacus beads clicking like the mandibles of insects as they tally the chests. By night, you play whist with the other agents of Jardine, Matheson and Company, the humid air thick with the sweet, sickly scent of the product and the buzz of malarial mosquitoes. You are a king in exile, living just outside the jurisdiction of a vast, ancient empire that pretends you do not exist. From the deck you can see the distant, hazy hills of the Celestial Empire, a place you are forbidden to enter. But you enter it every day, in the form of the foreign mud that flows from your ship up the river on swift, well-armed smuggling boats known as fast crabs. In our history, this trade was a crime, a source of immense friction that would lead to a sharp, decisive war. Here, it is not a crime, it is a strategic imperative. The endless, grinding Cold War in Europe, the subsidies to Austria, the funding for the analytical engine, the cost of containing the Luddite shires, it all has to be paid for. And it is paid for with Chinese silver, traded for your opium. The pressure from London is relentless. Your ledgers are not just business accounts, they are instruments of national survival. The directives from your superiors are no longer about market share. They are about meeting quotas set by men who whisper in the halls of Whitehall. The scale of the operation is terrifying. It is not a trade, it is a deluge. You have pushed the product far beyond the decadent coastal elites. You have armed your own smugglers, creating a private navy that systematically breaks the Qing blockade. You have established new receiving stations all along the coast, turning small fishing villages into narcotics hubs. You are not just a merchant, you are a vector of a plague. Then, the Celestial Empire strikes back. A new imperial commissioner, a man of ferocious, incorruptible will named Lin Zexu, arrives in Canton. He is the real-world anchor of your nightmare. He does not negotiate. He does not posture. He acts. He surrounds the foreign factories, quarantines you and every other European, and demands you hand over every last ounce of opium. This happened in our world too. The British traders surrendered their opium, which Lin Zexu then theatrically destroyed. A casus belli was established, and a professional expeditionary force was dispatched from Britain to wage a carefully calibrated war for free trade and treaty ports. But your world is different. The East India Company and private firms like yours are not just traders. They are semi-official arms of a desperate state. And you do not just hand over the opium. Your superior, a ruthless Scot named Jardine, sends a secret message out on a fast boat to the Royal Navy's China Station, a fleet already on high alert due to the global tensions. The message is simple. We are under siege. Our property, which is vital to the Crown's interests, is threatened. Intervene. The intervention is not a stately affair planned in London. It is a swift, brutal response by the local commander, an aggressive admiral who sees the world in terms of threats and broadsides. His ships do not just blockade Canton. They obliterate the Bogue forts with a terrifying display of firepower. Commissioner Lin's war junks are turned into floating infernos. The war has begun. But it is not the war we know. It is not a war to open China. It is a war to break it. Here is the unexpected, catastrophic twist. Your strategy, conceived in the claustrophobic confines of the Hercules, is not to march on Beijing and force a treaty on the emperor. That would be too slow, too expensive. The goal is simply to maximize the flow of silver as quickly as possible. The admiral, with your company's guidance, uses his naval supremacy to launch a series of lightning raids up and down the Chinese coast. But you are not just attacking forts. You are making contact with local governors, with ambitious generals, with the leaders of the secret societies who chafe under Manchu rule. The offer you make is always the same. The emperor in Beijing cannot protect you from us, you say, and he cannot give you the wealth that we can. Declare your loyalty to a new power, your own, and we will guarantee your security. In return, you will grant us an exclusive monopoly on the opium trade in your province. It is the doctrine of sponsored insurrection, perfected in the hills of Italy, now applied on a continental scale. In the province of Fujian, a local general, seeing the smoking ruins of his fleet, agrees. In Guangdong, a cabal of merchants, tired of the emperor's taxes, forms a Council of Provincial Harmony and signs a treaty with you. You are carving the empire up, piece by piece. The ethical tension becomes the very air you breathe. You sail with the fleet up the Pearl River, no longer as a pariah, but as an honoured guest of the new Guangdong Council. You see the devastation your war has wrought. Villages burned, fields of rice gone to seed because the men are either dead or have fled. And in every town you see them, the ghosts, men and women with hollow eyes and skeletal frames, shuffling towards the new, officially sanctioned opium dens you have licensed. You are invited to a banquet by the new Protector General of Guangdong, a man who was a minor bureaucrat a month ago and is now a warlord. You sit on silk cushions and are served 100 delicacies from porcelain bowls of exquisite beauty. He toasts you with rice wine, praising the new era of cooperation and prosperity. As you eat, you can hear sporadic gunfire from the city, where his black-clad soldiers are putting down a pocket of Qing loyalists. The man you are dining with is a traitor, a drug lord, and a tyrant, and you are his kingmaker. You tell yourself this is simply business, that the Qing Dynasty was corrupt and decadent, that you are bringing them into the modern world. But you look at the vacant, opium-addled eyes of the servants, and you know you are lying. The final result is not a single treaty like the Treaty of Nanking. It is the celestial fracture. The Qing Dynasty does not fall. It shrinks. It becomes a rump state, the northern Qing, ruling the lands north of the Yangtze, locked in a permanent, low-grade war with the new rival states of the south, the Protectorate of Guangdong, the Fujian Dominion, and others, each one a client state of the British, its economy based on the export of tea and silk and the import of your opium. You have not created a colony. You have created a cancer. You have fractured a civilization that has been unified for millennia. One evening, back on the Hercules, a clerk drops a priceless Ming vase. It shatters on the deck. You look at the pieces, the beautiful blue and white pattern now an incoherent jigsaw puzzle. You see it for what it is. A perfect metaphor for what you have done. You have taken something whole, ancient, and beautiful, and you have broken it into 1,000 pieces for the sake of the silver in your vault. You are walking through a field in County Meath, Ireland, but the word field is a cruel joke. The ground is a black, pocked with the failed ridges of potato drills. The air, which should be sweet with the smell of turned earth and summer rain, is filled with an ungodly stench. It is the smell of putrefaction, the smell of a nation's food supply, dissolving into a stinking, inedible mush. It is the autumn of 1845, and God has turned his face from Ireland. In our history, this blight, Phytophthora infestans, brought a great famine that was specific to Ireland, a horror made possible by a cruel nexus of land ownership, poverty, and dependence on a single crop. The British government's response was late, inadequate, and ideologically blinkered, a failure that would leave a wound in the Irish soul for centuries. But in your world, the blight has found a different host. Europe, a continent where the sinews of war have been stretched for a generation, where millions of men have been pulled from the farms to serve in the perpetually mobilized armies of the Iron Divide, where peasant farmers from the Loire to the Vistula, struggling with crippling war taxes and uncertain markets, have increasingly turned to the humble, reliable potato as the only crop that could feed their families on ever-shrinking plots of land. The news came in whispers at first. A strange fog in Flanders, failed crops in the Rhineland, the heart of the German Shatterlands. Then the reports became a flood. The potato crop in northern France, the breadbasket of the Gallic Republic, is gone. In Prussia, the sandy soils that could grow little else have yielded only black rot. From the Austrian plains of Galicia to the insurgent hills of Piedmont, the same story. The food of the poor has vanished. This is not a famine. This is the Malthusian reckoning. You are not an Irish farmer. You are a British civil servant, a junior member of a Royal Commission on Agricultural Security. You were sent here to Ireland to study the blight's initial outbreak. Now, your task has changed. You are to assess the potential impact of a continental crop failure on British security. You travel with a military escort, not for fear of Irish rebels, but because starvation has already turned the countryside into a desperate, lawless landscape. Your carriage stops in a village that looks like a scene from a medieval plague. The people are spectres. Their skin is stretched tight over their bones, their eyes huge and hollow in their sockets. There is no anger here. Not yet. Just a profound, terrifying silence. A silence of empty stomachs and abandoned hope. You see a woman by the side of the road, trying to feed her child a soup made from weeds and boiled nettles. She doesn't look at you. She doesn't ask for help. She is beyond that. She is simply going through the motions of a life that has already ended. The ethical tension of your position is absolute. Your government has seen this coming. For years, the analytical engine, fed with data on crop yields and shipping routes, has been gaming out scenarios like this. Britain, the naval power, the global trader, is uniquely positioned to survive. The Corn Laws were never repealed. They were militarized. The Royal Navy does not just protect trade, it controls it. British granaries are full, stocked with wheat from Canada and Russia, the royalist southern rump state, which is happy to sell its grain to its enemy's enemy. Britain can feed itself. Your commission's preliminary report makes this chillingly clear. You sit in your tent at night, writing it by the light of an oil lamp. The continental famine, you write, while a humanitarian catastrophe of the first order, presents a strategic opportunity of unparalleled scope. You outline the cold logic. The Gallic Republic's armies will march on an empty stomach. The Prussian state's famed discipline will collapse in the face of bread riots. Austria's fragile ethnic balance will shatter as starving Hungarians and Czechs rise up against Vienna. The famine will do what 3 decades of war and diplomacy could not. It will break the will of your enemies. The recommendation is brutal. Maintain the blockade of Axis ports. Restrict grain exports to the Entente, aligned German states, and use your food surplus as a weapon. Buy the loyalty of wavering nations with bread. Starve the defiant into submission. You pause, your pen hovering over the page. This isn't war. This is extermination by policy. You are advocating a course of action that will kill millions of innocent people farmers, weavers, children to achieve a political goal. You close your eyes and see the woman with the nettle soup. You sign your name to the report. The unexpected twist is the utter failure of ideology in the face of an empty stomach. The grand narratives that have defined your age, republicanism, nationalism, legitimism, dissolve like sugar in water. In France, the radical Gallic Republic, which had preached a crusade of liberation, turns on its own people. The legions of liberation are recalled from the German frontier and sent into the countryside to confiscate grain from French farmers at bayonet point. The cry of liberty, equality, fraternity is replaced by the desperate slogan, "The Republic must eat." The government survives, but its moral authority is destroyed forever. In the German Shatterlands, the famine does not unify. It atomizes. The competing identities of civilization and fatherland become meaningless. The only identity that matters is your village, your valley. Armed bands of starving peasants roam the countryside, fighting over the last sacks of flour. The fragile states of the South collapse into a patchwork of local fiefdoms. It is a new 30 Years' War, fought with scythes and hunting rifles. In Prussia, the king opens the army's granaries to the people of Berlin to prevent riots. But this act of mercy bankrupts the state and leaves his army unable to march. The famed Prussian military machine is paralyzed, not by a defeat in battle, but by a fungus. You return to London. The city is an island of grim prosperity in a sea of despair. The ports are bustling, the granaries are full, the smoke from the loyalist factories still rises into the sky. But the news from the continent, printed in the papers, is apocalyptic. Etchings show skeletal figures lying dead in the streets of Paris and Berlin. There are reports of mass migrations, of whole provinces abandoned, of cannibalism in the more remote regions. You walk through Hyde Park. The children of the English elite, well-fed and rosy-cheeked, are sailing toy boats on the Serpentine. A few years ago, you feared a French invasion. You feared the power of the Russian steamroller. Now, you fear nothing but the silence from across the water. The Malthusian reckoning has come. It has not been a neat, statistical correction. It has been the apocalypse. And your nation, by a combination of geography, policy, and ruthless, calculated inhumanity, has been appointed its chief surviving angel of death. You stand on a wrought-iron platform overlooking the heart of the Grand Coventry terminus, and you are officiating at a sacrament. Below you, the great locomotive Leviathan hisses, its polished brass fittings gleaming in the gaslight. It is a machine of terrifying beauty, a dragon of iron and steam, and the men and women gathered on the platform look upon it with an awe that is nothing short of religious. This is not a train station. It is a cathedral, and you are a priest of the order of rational progress. The year is 1851. The great European famine, the Malthusian reckoning, is over. But the world it left behind is a haunted, broken thing. The old gods are dead, or they are silent. In the streets of Paris, they did not pray to Jesus for bread. They cursed his name while they butchered the horses of the rich. In the shattered fields of Prussia, the Lutheran God of order provided no comfort, only the stark evidence of his own abandonment. The grand ideologies of the previous generation, republicanism, nationalism, monarchism, all revealed themselves to be hollow words, empty promises in the face of a starving child. The world was scoured clean of faith, and into that vacuum something new has rushed. A new religion, a faith for a faithless age. Your order was not born in a monastery, but in a workshop. Your founder was not a mystic, but an engineer, one of Babbage's former acolytes, a man who saw in the analytical engine a glimmer of a new kind of salvation. He looked upon the chaos of the post-famine world and saw a failure of system, a lack of rational design. Humanity, left to its own passions and superstitions, had failed. But the machine was perfect. The machine was predictable, logical, and powerful. It did not hunger, it did not fear, it did not hate. It simply worked. You hold up your hands for silence. The crowd, a mix of factory foremen, skilled mechanics, and their families, falls quiet. They are not the ragged, desperate poor. They are the new elite of this world. The technocrats, the men and women who understand the gears and the circuits. Your robes are not of silk or linen, but of a tough, practical grey serge, the kind worn by a draftsman. Instead of a cross, you wear a polished brass slide rule on a chain around your neck. Brothers and sisters of the cog and the piston, you begin, your voice amplified by a cunningly designed acoustic horn. We gather here to consecrate this engine, not as an idol of brass, for we are not idolaters. We consecrate it as a promise, a symbol of the covenant of steam and steel. Your sermon is not about sin and redemption, it is about efficiency and progress. You speak of the chaotic, irrational world of the before times, a world of kings who ruled by the accident of birth, of parliaments that governed by the babble of opinion, of economies that ran on the volatile fuel of human greed. That world was a faulty machine, you declare, your voice ringing through the iron trussed roof. It was poorly designed and inefficiently run. The reckoning was not a punishment from a vengeful sky god. It was a system failure, a catastrophic design flaw, and it has purged the world of its irrational components. This is the central, chilling tenet of your faith. The famine was not a tragedy. It was a necessary, logical event. It was the world's way of clearing out the old, inefficient code. It was a Malthusian sacrament, brutal but essential. This is the ethical tension you live with every day. Your faith finds meaning and even beauty in the deaths of millions. It transforms the greatest horror of the century into an act of sublime, impersonal reason. A divine audit. You gesture to the Leviathan. Behold the new model. This engine does not ask for your opinion. It does not care for your traditions. It follows the immutable laws of thermodynamics. Its power is not a gift from on high, but a fact, calculated and proven. This is our exemplar, a society built on the principles of the machine, a government run not by aristocrats or demagogues, but by engineers, a world where every human component is integrated into a single, perfectly efficient system. This is the rational state your order preaches, a world governed by the spiritual heirs of the analytical engine, a world of pure, unadulterated technocracy. It is a vision that is gaining terrifying traction in the loyalist shires of England, in the rebuilding industrial zones of the Rhineland, and even among the shell-shocked survivors of the Gallic Republic. The unexpected twist is the schism that has already emerged within your new religion. While your sect, the Order of Rational Progress, worships the dynamic, expansive power of the locomotive, the god of connection, of networks, of centralized power, a rival faith has taken root in the recovering Luddite commonwealths of the north. You call them the weavers, the static heretics. They too have seen the failure of the old gods. But they have drawn a different conclusion. Their god is not the locomotive, but the automated loom. They worship in the silent, perfected halls of their textile mills. Their faith is one of locality, of self-sufficiency, of the perfectly balanced, closed system. They see the Leviathan not as a savior, but as a demon, a tool of a centralizing power that will inevitably corrupt and consume. Their priests are the master craftsmen who can maintain the intricate perfection of their machines. Their scripture is the technical manual. Their idea of salvation is a world of ordered, isolated, autarkic communities, each a perfect, self-regulating machine, humming in splendid isolation. The ceremony reaches its climax. A young couple comes forward, their firstborn child in their arms. This is a dedication. You do not anoint the child with water. You take a brass caliper and perform a series of precise measurements of the infant's skull, noting the results in a ledger. We dedicate this child to the system. You intone. May its inputs be rational, and its outputs be productive. May it find its perfect place as a functional component in the great machine of society. You then take a drop of clean hot oil from the locomotive's lubricator and touch it to the child's forehead. Let the friction of irrationality be banished. Let your life run smooth and true. By the logic of the prime mover, it is so. The crowd murmurs its assent. It is so. The locomotive's great whistle blows, a deafening shriek of steam and power that shakes the very foundations of the station. The service is over. The congregants disperse, not with the quiet reverence of an old-world church, but with the brisk, purposeful energy of a shift change. They have their faith, a faith of iron and steam, of numbers and logic, a faith that promises a world without chaos, without suffering, without hunger, a world that runs on time. And as you watch the Leviathan begin to pull out of the station, its great piston arms moving with the relentless, inhuman grace of a god, you feel a profound sense of peace. You have found the one true faith for the modern age, a faith that has an answer for everything except the question of what it is for. You ride through a landscape of ghosts. The steppe grass, silver gold under the vast, empty sky, whispers a song of forgotten names. Here and there, the blackened ruins of a Russian Orthodox church jut from the horizon like a broken tooth. This is the land of the Don Cossacks, the Astrakhan Tatars, the Circassian horsemen. For centuries, they were the violent, unruly fringe of the Tsar's empire, sometimes allies, sometimes rebels, but always, ultimately, subjects. Now they are free, and they have built a nation on the ashes of their former masters. The year is 1855. You are an envoy from the Ottoman Sultan, a man of letters and diplomacy, sent on a delicate mission to the court of the new power that has risen from the chaos of the Russian Civil War. They call their state the Caspian Emirate, but the terrified whispers in European capitals have given it another name, the Kalmyk Caliphate. Your journey has taken you from the relative civilization of Trebizond, across the jagged peaks of the Caucasus, and down into the great plains that stretch between the Black and Caspian seas. The Russian Civil War, the grinding three-way struggle between the Commonwealth Republicans in St. Petersburg, the Royalists in Moscow, and a dozen other factions, has been the longest and bloodiest conflict of the century. It has bled the Russian heartland dry, and in that power vacuum, a new force emerged. It was not a planned revolution. It was a coalescence of old resentments and new opportunities. It was led not by a politician, but by a warrior prophet, a Chechen Sufi mystic named Sheikh Mansour II, who claimed to be the reincarnation of the legendary 18th century resistance leader. He preached a simple, electrifying message. The Russians, both the godless republicans and the idol-worshipping royalists, were a plague. Their weakness was a sign from Allah. Now was the time to drive them from the lands of the faithful, to reclaim the Caucasus, and to build a pure state, a warrior's state, under the green banner of the Prophet. His call was answered. The fiercely independent mountain clans of Chechnya and Dagestan rose up. They were joined by the Kalmyks, the Buddhist Mongol horsemen of the steppes, who in a surprising turn converted to Islam en masse, under the sheikh's charismatic influence, trading their prayer wheels for Qurans. They brought with them the ancient, terrifying tactics of the Golden Horde. Tatar cavalrymen, Circassian adventurers, even escaped Cossack serfs joined the jihad. They were a whirlwind of destruction. They did not fight set-piece battles. They were a ghost army of raiders, striking deep into the Russian interior, burning supply depots, liberating prison camps, and melting back into the steppes. They shattered the exhausted armies of both Russian factions. Now, you are approaching their capital, the ancient city of Astrakhan, which they have renamed Itil after the old Khazar metropolis. The city is a vibrant, chaotic testament to their victory. You see mosques being built from the stones of dismantled churches. In the markets, you hear a dozen languages: Chechen, Tatar, Circassian, Kalmyk. You see Russian slaves, their faces etched with a permanent hollow shock, being sold alongside bolts of silk and spices. This is not just a new nation. It is the reversal of 300 years of history. The Russian conquest of the south has been undone. The tide has turned. You are brought to the Khan's palace, the former residence of the Russian governor. Sheikh Mansour II, now styled the Emir, is an unsettling presence. He is a man of the mountains, with eyes that seem to see straight through your diplomatic pleasantries. He is surrounded not by effete courtiers, but by his captains, warriors with scarred faces and hands that rest easily on the hilts of their shashka swords. Your mission is to formalize an alliance. The Ottoman Empire, your master, sees in this new emirate a powerful buffer state, a permanent dagger pointed at the soft underbelly of whatever Russian state finally emerges from the civil war. You offer them modern cannons, military advisors, and trade. The emir listens, his face unreadable. "We thank the Padishah in Constantinople for his gifts," he says, his voice a low growl. "We will accept his cannons, but we do not need his advisors. We have our own way of war. It is the way of the wolf, not the way of the shepherd. This is the ethical tension of your alliance. Your sultan wishes to use the emirate as a pawn in the great game, a conventional piece on the chessboard. But these men are not pawns. They are a force of nature. They do not share your world's values of statecraft and diplomacy. They see their victory not as a political achievement, but as a divine mandate." Later, one of the emir's captains, a Kalmyk with the flat, impassive face of a steppe idol, tells you bluntly, "Constantinople is weak. It is full of Franks and half-believers. One day, when we have finished with the Russians, we will come and purify it. You are here to forge an alliance with a power that sees you as a future conquest. You are feeding a wolf, hoping it will only ever eat your enemies." The unexpected twist is the cultural and technological syncretism of this new state. It is not a primitive, backward-looking caliphate. While it rejects the ideologies of Europe, it eagerly adopts its tools. The emir takes you to his prized possession, a captured Republican arms factory on the banks of the Volga. It is now run by a motley crew of Ottoman engineers, Persian craftsmen, and European renegades. A German artilleryman who deserted the Prussian army, an Italian anarchist who fled the collapse of his insurgency. They are not Muslims. The emir calls them the people of the tool. They are valued for what they can do, not what they believe. Here, they are manufacturing not just rifles and cannons, but something new. They are combining the Cossack tradition of the taxanka, a horse-drawn cart with a heavy machine gun With the Kalmyks' mastery of horse archery and mobile warfare, they are creating a new form of mechanized cavalry, a fast-moving, hard-hitting force perfectly adapted to the wide-open spaces of the steppe. It is a terrifying fusion of ancient tactics and modern technology. You are witnessing the birth of a new kind of power, one that does not fit into the neat categories of the European mind. It is not liberal or conservative. It is not progressive or reactionary. It is something else, something older, fiercer, and perhaps more durable. That evening you are invited to watch the Emir's horseman train. As the sun sets, casting long shadows across the steppe, thousands of riders wheel and charge in a breathtaking display of precision and ferocity. They are not a modern army. They are a horde, remade for an age of gunpowder. You see in them the ghosts of Genghis Khan and Tamerlane, returned from the grave. You, the sophisticated diplomat from the ancient city of Constantinople, feel a primal fear. You came here to find an ally. You have found a prophecy of a future war that will be fought on terms your world has long forgotten. You are in the British Museum reading room, and the silence is so profound it feels like a physical presence. It is the winter of 1867. Dust motes dance in the weak sunlight, slanting from the great dome, illuminating a circle of hunched figures, scribes, and scholars in a temple of accumulated knowledge. You are one of them. You are a philosopher, a minor German exile, a man whose life has been a study in obscurity. Your name is Karl Marx. Here, in this sanctuary of thought, you are working on your life's project, a grand critique of the world as you see it. You call it Das Kapital, but the book you are writing is not the book we know. It is a thin, dense, and almost unreadably abstract volume. It is a work not of political economy, but of pure philosophy. It is a footnote to Hegel. In our world, you looked out from this room and saw a world shaped by a single, overwhelming force: industrial capitalism. You saw the factories of Manchester, the dark, satanic mills, churning out not just textiles, but a new kind of human being, the proletariat. You saw the stark, brutal clarity of the class struggle between the bourgeoisie who owned the means of production and the workers who had nothing to sell but their labour. Your work was a prophecy, a scientific analysis of a system that you believed contained the seeds of its own destruction. Your name would become a spectre, a promise, and a curse that would haunt the next century. But the world you see from this reading room is not that world. It is a fractured, chaotic, and ideologically bewildering landscape. When you look for capitalism, you do not find a single coherent system. You find a dozen mutant variants, each one twisted by the political realities of the Iron Divide and its aftermath. You try to analyze the economic situation in Britain. But what is it? A state-directed war economy in the loyalist South, driven by the insatiable demands of the Admiralty and the cryptographic calculations of the Analytical engine. A network of neo-guild, artisanal communes in the Luddite North, which trade by barter and have outlawed usury. A slave economy in all but name in the opium-fueled client states of southern China. There is no single capitalism to critique. There is only a patchwork of expedients, a mess of historical accidents. You turn your attention to the proletariat. Where is this great, unified industrial working class that is to be the agent of history? In France, the most radicalized workers did not stay in the factories. They joined the Legions of Liberation and became soldiers of a revolutionary state, their class consciousness sublimated into nationalist fervor. Now, after the famine and the collapse of the Gallic Republic's crusading dream, they are simply survivors, scrabbling for work in a shattered economy. In the German Shatterlands, the workers never had a chance to unite. A man who works in a Prussian state arsenal in Berlin and a man who works in a French subsidized workshop in Stuttgart do not see each other as brothers in the same class. They see each other as enemies in a national struggle. Their identity is not defined by their relationship to the means of production, but by the flag they are forced to salute. You read the dispatches from the Americas. You see the ruthless expansion of the United States, a nation of land-hungry farmers and merchants, not industrial proletarians. You see the state-led developmentalism of the Gran Colombia Confederation, a system that defies all your categories, a form of authoritarian state capitalism that builds roads and canals while suppressing dissent. The world refuses to fit your model. The beautiful, brutal simplicity of your dialectic thesis, antithesis, synthesis, shatters against the jagged, complex reality of this history. The great conflict of the age, the one that truly defines the world, is not the class struggle. It is the struggle between rival geopolitical blocs, between competing nationalisms, and now, between new, strange technological religions. These are the forces that move men to kill and die. The question of who owns the factory is secondary to the question of which god you pray to, the locomotive or the loom. And so, your work turns inward, away from the messy, disappointing world of economics and politics, and back to the clean, orderly world of German idealism. You write about alienation, yes, but it is not the alienation of the worker from the product of his labour. It is a more abstract, philosophical alienation, the alienation of the spirit from itself, a concept so esoteric that only a handful of other Hegelian scholars in Germany will ever bother to read it. The ethical tension is your own profound, gnawing irrelevance. You believe, with every fibre of your being, that you have discovered the secret key to history. You believe you can offer humanity a path to liberation from exploitation. But humanity is not listening. It is marching to the beat of a different drum. Your letters to the few remaining socialist societies in Europe go unanswered. They are too busy arguing about whether to support the rational progressivists or the static weavers. You try to publish an article in a radical newspaper, and the editor sends it back with a polite note. Our readers are more interested in the new developments in steam cavalry being pioneered by the Kalmyk Caliphate. You are a prophet whose prophecy has been rendered obsolete by events. You have a cure for a disease that the patient does not have. The unexpected twist is the fate of your great rival. In this timeline, without the spectre of a unified, international socialist movement to frighten the European powers, the anarchist and syndicalist ideas you so despise have found fertile ground. Your rival, Mikhail Bakunin, is not a fellow exile scribbling in obscurity. Having escaped from a royalist Russian prison, he found his way to the Luddite Commonwealths. There, his ideas of a stateless federation of autonomous communes were not a distant dream. They were a living reality. He has become the leading philosopher of the Weaver faith. His anarchist writings, which you consider to be incoherent romantic nonsense, are treated as holy scripture in the workshops of the North. He is a historical force. You are a historical footnote. One day, a young man comes to your desk in the reading room. He is a German student, bright-eyed and earnest. He has read one of your early pamphlets. "Dr. Marx," he says, "I have read your work on the alienation of the spirit. It is brilliant, but what is to be done?" You look up from your books at the sincere, hopeful face of this young man. He is asking you for a program, a plan, a way to change the world, and you have nothing to offer him. Nothing but a string of complex German words that explain everything and change nothing. You stare at the half-finished manuscript of Das Kapital on your desk. You see it for what it is. Not a weapon, not a blueprint for revolution. It is an intellectual tombstone, marking the grave of a world that was never born. The specific, unique conditions of centralized industrial capitalism, the very system that was both your subject and your nemesis, never fully materialized. It was strangled in its cradle by the endless war, the sponsored insurrections, the famine, and the rise of the new faiths. What is to be done? You repeat, your voice barely a whisper. One must think, young man. One must simply think. The student leaves, his face a mask of disappointment. You are left alone in the great, silent room, with the ghosts of 1 billion unread words, and the overwhelming silence of a history that has passed you by. And so the dream ends. We stand at the Divergence, that cold January night in Vienna, and look down the 2 corridors of time. One path led to the world we know, a century of peace between the great powers, a peace that was not gentle. It was the peace of the predator, which allowed the engines of progress and plunder to roar to life, binding the globe in networks of steel and telegraph wire. It was a world that built vast, cohesive empires, global financial systems, and universal ideologies, whose clash would define the age to come. Its brutality was organized, systematic, and on a scale previously unimaginable. The other path led to the world we have just walked, a world of perpetual simmering war, where the nascent energies of the industrial age were squandered in 100 proxy conflicts and border skirmishes. It was a shattered mirror, reflecting a dozen different, warring futures that never came to be. Nationalism did not unify nations. It tore them into pieces. Revolution did not liberate. It was weaponized by empires. Progress did not bring prosperity. It became a terrifying new god for the survivors of an apocalyptic famine. There is no simple verdict here. One history purchased its global order with the coin of industrial misery and colonial conquest. The other avoided that specific sin, only to descend into a fever dream of fragmentation and civil war. One timeline forged the great isms, liberalism, socialism, capitalism, in the crucible of a long peace. The other saw them mutate and die in the cradle, replaced by cults of the machine and the logic of the gun. We are left only with the trade-off. Stark and unsettling. Was the brutal world-spanning order of our 19th century preferable to a century of chaotic, localized disorder? Or was our long peace merely a longer, slower fuse, leading to a greater explosion? All we know is that in one room, one man chose compromise over pride, and the world we inhabit was born from that flicker of hesitation.